The United States Military Academy, located at West Point, New York, was the primary source of officers in the American Civil War. Founded in 1802, the Academy taught its cadets engineering, tactics, strategy, and military history. Many lessons came from the writings of Henri Baron Jomini, a Swiss thinker and writer who based his theories on the Napoleonic Wars. West Point produced somewhere around 3,000 officers from its founding to the beginning of the Civil War. But was a West Point education necessary?
Having never been formally trained in military strategy, Joshua Chamberlain had to learn on his own. After enlisting in the Army in 1862, he was offered the colonelcy of the 20th Maine, but he turned it down, saying that he first had to learn the trade. Chamberlain learned strategy and tactics from the 20th Maine's first colonel, Adelbert Ames, and while training with the Army of the Potomac. He was eventually promoted to the colonel of the 20th Maine, which saw its first action at the Battle of Fredericksburg.
The Battle of Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg was Chamberlain and his regiment's first real action during the war. Sadly, they were involved in the total devastation on MUHS Heights, but didn't suffer an outstanding amount of casualties unlike the rest of the Union Army at the battle. Despite their luck, they spent their night in the miserable cold while the broken morale of the entire army laid scattered among the countless dead bodies on the battlefield. The Battle of Gettysburg. The second day of Gettysburg is seen by most as Chamberlain and the 20th Maine's finest moment throughout the war. Posted on the far left of the army, Chamberlain was the last line of defense and therefore had to do everything in his power to prevent a flanking maneuver. Chamberlain's men were able to fend off countless attacks until they eventually ran out of ammunition. After realizing his situation, Chamberlain told his men to fix bayonets and ready themselves to charge. After doing what they were told, the men charged down the hill and captured a majority of the Confederate army at Pickett's charge.
After Grant broke the siege of Petersburg, General Lee was forced to flee west, trying to find supplies for his army in order to continue the fight. On the morning of April 9th, he ran into a line of Union cavalry led by U.S. Major General Philip Sheridan. Believing the unit to be solely cavalry, Lee ordered an attack. Upon realizing that 2 corps of infantry supported the cavalry, however, Lee realized that the battle was lost and that his only remaining option was to surrender. Lee surrendered to General Grant later that afternoon in the home of Wilbur McLean in the village of Appomattox Courthouse. Joshua Chamberlain was one of the first Union officers to learn of the surrender, as on the morning of April 9th he had received a Confederate officer under flag of truce. The officer bore a message that Lee wished to surrender to Grant. The next day, April 10th, Chamberlain was informed that he had been selected to command the Union troops during the procession of the Confederate soldiers as part of the formal surrender of General Lee's army. As the men marched by, Chamberlain, on his own initiative, ordered his men to come to attention and carry arms, saluting the Confederate soldiers as they passed. Although the decision was criticized in the North, Chamberlain defended his choice for the rest of his life. In his memoir, Passing of the Armies, Chamberlain wrote, "The momentous meaning of this occasion impressed me deeply. I resolved to mark it by some token of recognition, which could bear no other than the salute of arms. Well aware of the responsibility assumed and of the criticisms that would follow, none of that kind could move me in the least. Before us in proud humiliation stood the embodiment of manhood, men whom neither toils and sufferings, nor the fact of death, nor disaster, nor hopelessness could bend from their resolve. Was not such manhood to be welcomed back into a Union so tested and assured?
Born in Philadelphia, George Brinton McClellan was accepted at the United States Military Academy in 1842. At West Point, he was known for his energy and ambition, graduating second in his class in 1846. When the Civil War began, McClellan re-enlisted and quickly rose to the rank of Major General, partly due to his connections with Secretary of the Treasury Salmon Chase. McClellan experienced early success fighting in the area that would become West Virginia, and President Abraham Lincoln, desperate for any success after the failure of Bull Run, appointed McClellan to command of the Army of the Potomac on July 26, 1861. McClellan at first seemed to be an able commander, organizing the Army of the Potomac and transforming the volunteers into a true fighting force. However, McClellan's skills as an organizer did not translate well to the battlefield. Convinced of his own military genius, he devised a grand scheme to sail south and march on Richmond from the southeast. Despite his West Point training, however, McClellan's hesitation and unwillingness to attack turned the so-called Peninsula Campaign into a failure. McClellan's hesitation would become his trademark throughout the war and led to his removal from command after he failed to pursue the enemy at the Battle of Antietam. Even though he never attended West Point or received any formal military training, Chamberlain proved a remarkable commander, achieving consistent success on the battlefield. General McClellan's West Point education, on the other hand, could not prevent him from failing as a commander in the Union Army. Although West Point was responsible for producing many of the officers on both sides of the Civil War, the cases of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and George Brinton McClellan showed that a West Point education did not necessarily lead to success as a commander in the American Civil War.
We could not look in those brave, bronze faces, thinking of the battles we've been through. I wish I had the time to tell you what those men were. We could not look into those brave, bronze faces we have met on so many fields, where glorious valor made the very earth glorious under their feet. And think of such a thing as hatred and mean revenge. Oh no, that was not our part. We were the appointed instruments to the divine decree that such a thing in the course of human history caused the steps to be taken in the enfranchisement of man. No, it was our glory. Only that victory we had won was for others, for those very men before us, as well for ourselves and ours. Our joy was deep, far drawn, unspoken satisfaction. We seemed to be in the presence of some mighty angel appointed for human destinies, perhaps with the power of correcting errors and even forgiving sins. And aught we know, accepting sacrifice of crowning martyrs for the sake of men, which is the sake of God. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain.